So here Moses is in this land where he is completely ostracized, he has nowhere to go because he can't go to where he came from because they won't accept him, and he can't go to where he's just come from because they want nothing to do with him. They sought to kill him, so he escapes to Midian.
Yes.
He escapes to a place where nobody knows who he is.
Right.
And there he becomes content. He runs into Jethro's daughters and helps them out in their situation, and Jethro in turn gives him one of his daughters as wife. So as we see in the story, Moses is content to be taking care of his father-in-law's sheep, and he has a son in this strange land, and he's content where he is. He's not worried about the Egyptians. He's not worried about the Israelites. He's not worried about anything, but he's content to be where he is.
Amen.
So it's in this place of contentment, this place of comfort, this place of relative ease that we see Moses at this time. And we see him as he encounters this burning bush. So we can understand somewhat Moses' disbelief and his bewilderment when the voice of the Lord comes forth from the burning bush and says, I've chosen you to go and deliver your people.
Yes.
You can almost hear Moses say, God, I think you've got the wrong guy here, because clearly, the Israelites, they don't accept me, and I know Pharaoh's not going to listen to me. So clearly there must be someone else around here that you're talking to, because it couldn't be me. It couldn't be my life. It couldn't be me who you desire to use to deliver your people. But God. You see, when God chooses someone to use, when he chooses us, when he calls us out, when he sets us apart for his glory, he does not leave us to our own devices. He doesn't leave us by ourselves. But he said in verse 12 that certainly, not maybe, not, if you do everything right, then perhaps. But he said, certainly, I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee. In other words, God gave him a sign that he would be with Moses. He gave Moses a sign that he wouldn't have to worry. All he would have to do is go and do what God said. And not only that, but God went into great detail. We read it starting in verse 11. God went into great detail as to what was about to happen, as to every minute detail. He said, you're going to go and you're going to say this, and Pharaoh's going to reject you. But when he rejects you, I'm going to do thus and thus. And all you have to do is do what I've commanded to you.
Amen.
God said that he would go with Moses. And we know that if God be for us, who can be against us? We know that if God is on our side, then we have nothing to fear. We know that if God goes before us, and there's no need to have fear in our heart, there's no need to second guess. No matter what the situation looks like, we don't have to question it, because we know that God is with us, and we know that all things work together for good to them that are the called according to his purpose. Now, it doesn't say that all things will be good. It doesn't say that all things will be nice and rosy and the path will be easy. But it says that all things work for good to them that are the called.
That's right.
Moses was called by God, and yet he questioned. God gave Moses the play-by-play. He gave him the specific details as to what was to happen, and even gave him signs so that he could see that God was with him. But yet, Moses came up with all manner of excuses to be able to get out of what God was telling him to do. Moses came up with every excuse that he could think of to prove that he was right and that God had the wrong person. But I tell you, God is never wrong. God knows every part of who we are, and yet he's called us for a purpose, just like he called Moses for a purpose. So Moses comes and he finds excuse that he can't go back to his people. He finds reason that he can't go back. He says, who am I, Lord? Who am I that you should choose me? You know that the Israelites, they won't listen to me, and Pharaoh won't listen to me. So who am I that you are choosing me? Moses wasn't entirely wrong. In the midst of his whining and his excuse making, he wasn't entirely wrong. For a prophet is not without honor, save in his own country. It's usually the people that know you best that have a tendency to limit their understanding of what God can do in your life. It's usually the people that are closest to you that have the hardest time believing that God has called you to do a work for His glory. And so that's why, like Moses, some of us have to be drawn out from amongst our brethren. Sometimes we have to be drawn out from amongst them who know us best, because their attitudes cause us to belittle ourselves in God's sight and to think that we can't possibly be used of God, because people that know us, they treat us in a certain way. So they help shape our attitude and help convince us that we can't possibly be used of God. Yes. And that's why sometimes we've got to separate ourselves from those who are closest to us. Yes. We've got to get ourselves away, so to speak, so that we can hear God's voice clearly and not hear the voices of those who've grown up with us, who say, you can't do that. You can't go out and minister to people. You can't preach. You can't play for God's glory. You can't do these things. We need to separate ourselves. We need to drop off some people that have come close to us, that influence our mind into thinking that we cannot be used for God's glory. Right. Yes, they may be your friends. Yes, they may be the people that you grew up with, the people that you kick it with. They may be the ones that you look to for a good time, to have fun, to hang out. But sometimes you need to drop off some people in order to be able to hear God's voice. You need to drop off some people who are hindrances in your life. Yes. We need to start letting go of some people in our lives. For it's those who know us close, who know us best, who sometimes have the best ability to dwarf our growth. Mm-hmm. Because they see us, they know us too well, so to speak. They know us too well. They knew what we were like when we were younger and the foolish things that we used to do. They knew the nonsense that we used to carry on and fool around with. And so they have these visions in their head, and they can't see past who you were. Right. They can't see what God has called you to be. Amen. They can't get past what they knew about you. Amen. And they can't see what God has called you to be. Right. Church, we need to drop off some people in our lives today. Moses had to be separated from the people so that God could use him. But yet, the people's mentality was still with him, because he still saw himself in the sight of those who he had run away from. He still saw himself as dejected and a reprobate, if you will. He still saw himself as one who just did not belong. He saw himself as being incapable to stand up to Pharaoh and to deliver the word that God had for him. My Lord. My Lord. Church, we need to get away from some people. We need to get away from that mentality that we are not able to be used of God. Amen. Because you see, sometimes even within the confines of the church, even within the house, sometimes there are those who are jealous, like the Hebrews. They're jealous of the gifts that God has given us. And instead of encouraging us to seek after God and to develop that gift, instead of encouraging us to do well and to grow in God, they're trying to pull us down. And, they smile to our faces, yet behind our backs, they say all manner of things about us. Yes. Even sometimes in the house, there are those who can't understand and can't believe and are jealous of what God has done and is doing in our lives.
Yes.
Thank you, Jesus. We need to move away from some people in our lives today. We need to recognize who is there to encourage us in the Lord, and recognize who is there to backbite and to talk. We spoke about it on Friday, that we need to seek out wise counsel and seek out those who are spiritual. Seek out those who seek after Christ instead of meddling with the gossip and the hearsaying. We need to move away from the naysayers who are content to stay where they are in bondage. And we need to seek after those and align ourselves with those who are spiritual. I don't know where the Lord's leading us this morning, but we need to align ourselves with those who are spiritual, who have a desire to seek after God and to be used of God.
Yes.